Welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thank you for joining us on a journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Jan Vermut, and joining me as always, my co-hosts Jonathan Edwards and Scott Burleson. Today, we want to explore how jobs to be done thinking is used in product design with our guest, Chris Belmore. Kind of named this a little bit like jobs to be done in the wild. So if it's not on the fancy kind of consultant slides, but how is it really used out there? Chris is director of product design at On the Beach, which is an online travel agent. He was director of product design at the Financial Times. So at FT, that's where we met. And he has a long-time agency experience, amongst others at Postmodern. So that's Postmodern without the P, a digital product agency, where he was a research and design leader before he moved to the corporate dark side. So, Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. Delighted to be here.
Well, let's jump in with kind of a couple of important questions on other stuff than jobs to be done in product design and so on. Football, of course. So I know that's kind of something you're into. And there was quite some talk this week about what's the guy, Thomas Tuchel? Will he fix things? What do you think? Is he going to bring it home, I think, as they say?
Someone has to one of these days. So it's like divided. Even my friends in our group chat, some people are very much like it needs to be, an English manager. I'm a bit more like, oh no, I'm fine with it. So well, time will tell. Yeah, and maybe we'll be having this conversation in a few years.
Yeah, that's good. Well, okay, so let's jump in with you and your career. So I really think you have quite an interesting career path. You covered a lot. You started, I think, more in marketing, went to UX, you've covered strategy, now you're in design and product. So tell us a little bit, like, well, what are you then at the end? Are you a designer? Are you a UX researcher? Are you a strategist? What is it where you ended up?
These days I'd mostly just say design leader, I think. I definitely lean heavily towards like research and strategy is like where that makes sense to me, those worlds. But I've been like a UX designer. I was a UX designer for a long time. And I've had teams of researchers, product designers, content designers, service designers, etc. Not very hands-on these days. More hopefully like good coach and supporting the team and like unblocking them, that type of thing.
I have the impression, but correct me if I'm wrong, or let me put the question to you. How do you think these different experiences help you today in your design work, in your design strategy work?
Yeah, having done like or kind of been in teams that have quite a few different roles. So, as you said, I started off in like marketing and kind of like almost like account management and project management, and then had moved into UX where I was surrounded by UI people, and then I sort of set up the research practice, and then I've headed up teams with like strategists and content and service design. What I think that maybe gives me an appreciation for is like how important it is that they all fit together.
Yeah.
And like it's almost like the bits in between them all and how they interact like become as important as like what any given part of the function is doing. So like as an example, I had like a few revelations which are pretty banal, but I went through them the same as everyone else, I think, which is like you really want to, it makes a big difference when you start everyone at once, right? So you have the entire team just like day one, we're jumping into the thing, we're tackling it together, we're understanding everything together. And like particularly research, some of the best projects I've ever had were we used to work a lot with sports organizations at that agency. And one of our clients was Arsenal Football Club. And we worked not far from them because we were based in North London. And we just wanted to conduct some like quick guerrilla research to see, to get some like usability testing and like understand how people were reacting to some of our ideas. So for us, that just meant we could like walk, 3 miles
across
down
the street
and like hang out at the stadium, around there. And so rather than just sending like the researchers and designers, the entire team went down. So we literally had like QA, engineers or Android developers or whatever it was with clipboards and phones, like going around walking up to people in like Arsenal scarves and like asking them. And of course, they couldn't be more delighted to have someone asking because they're probably a tourist that's traveled down, and they're very, very exciting.
Yeah.
And conducted the research that day. And then like I vividly remember like coming in the next day to the studio, and that whole team was just like cramped around two desks instead of all like spread out, and they were like absolutely buzzing because they'd all just literally been talking to customers. So I think like talk to customers, start at the same time, and it's about like getting the whole team, involved in those things. I think like that's probably
Yeah.
shaped quite a few of my opinions, having done or seen quite a lot of those roles up close.
Yeah, I think it's anything but banal, to be honest. So I mean, I see quite a lot of companies, and there is quite often there is this idea. Well, now we have a certain function, for example, UX, and then you send them off to the research, and you already have a disconnect. So I feel like that's it may sound banal, but it's very important. I mean, it's so much energy or so much, I don't know. Well, even insights and alignment gets lost if you work if there's so much silo thinking out there or so much
Yeah,
silos in companies.
or there's like degrees of separation, right? So
Yeah,
you can read the headlines of a research report and like maybe you learn something, or you can like watch some clips and that's a bit better. But that like actually being there, or watching it live and like seeing all the person's facial expressions and like when they screw up their face, or and it's like it sticks with you. People get bored of me saying like it's so visceral. You just have to come do it, and then like you'll be hooked. So yeah, big believer in that.
yeah, I totally agree. So we always try to invite as many people as we can along the round of a project. Of course, there's always time constraints and stuff, but the effects are I think amazing.
Yeah, it's not.
Um,
It's a really good galvanizing thing because people just
yeah,
they just get excited, right?
yeah. So I would like to get a little bit because I know kind of that's also where we kind of connected on around these jobs to be done thinking and get a little bit into that direction. So maybe it's a very broad and open question, but what's your jobs to be done story? How does that fit into your, well, when did that revelation come? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the actual like kind of framework of jobs to be done itself, I would definitely class myself as late to it, but I think much of the kind of philosophy behind
Yeah.
it I was quite early to, right? So probably if I had to say when did I start really understanding the power of like really getting into what users are doing and how they're thinking about it, it would be you mentioned my prior company Ostmodern, which was I think probably my first proper UX gig. Is my second UX job, but probably my first proper UX gig. And I feel like incredibly lucky to have been able to work there because it was a really small company. I think I was like employee number 9, but the standard was like insanely high, and I was working with people much more experienced than me, like a little bit older, but they'd also been doing it for a lot longer,
Yeah.
and very experienced, but also like very principled,
Yeah.
which shaped who came to them, right? Like what you stand for, this, working in consultancy world, like what you stand for shapes who comes to you, right? And they were big on lots of stuff. So I remember at that time, like there was a lot of noise about different ways of doing it, and I remember like user stories
Yeah.
being quite big, which I always just found very underwhelming. Like, as if all you need to do is write, as a user, I want to do, and like you can just magically write this in a sentence, in the structure, and hey, you understand, and it just sort of
Already you're customer focused, right? So
misused, so much.
yeah.
So we were always really interested in like, how and why people use the products, and there are probably like two examples which I actually never wrote the word jobs to be done anywhere, but hopefully they'll kind of tick your boxes and your understanding. So one time we were working with so I should explain at Osmodern we used to work with predominantly like broadcasters and sports organizations, and we developed like the early kind of Wild West days of streaming, like before
Okay.
all of the major streaming services you think of were in existence. We were kind of doing that back then, and worked with a German broadcaster, and we what we called it was mindsets.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so they had like a streaming service, a bit like a Netflix or something like that. And we kind of observed through testing that like people are just using it in different ways, right? And so what we called it, because I didn't really know about jobs to be done at that time, but like it's the mindset that they're approaching the product with.
Yeah.
And I sort of like had this little party trick that I would do, in early on in client relationships to explain this phenomenon, where I would say, right, I'm going to make some like statements about like how people use, this product. And I just want you to put your hand up when you hear the one that is you, right? So yeah, and you can play along with me now. So put your hand up when you hear the one that's you, right? Scott and Jonathan, you can play as well if you like. So hands up, like if in the last 6 months you have known like well ahead of time what you're going to be watching, maybe like next week. So it could be like a football match, yeah, and you just talked about football, or it could be like the next episode of your favorite TV show or something live or whatever. So have you had this where in the last 6 months you've known well ahead of time what you're going to watch? Hands up, right? And then like hands up if you've known probably on a Friday or a Saturday, depending on your schedule, that you're going to sit down and you're going to watch like a movie or like binge a few episodes of your box set, and you just you know that well ahead of time. Hands up, hands
So
up.
that's another plug for our YouTube channel, by the way. But yeah,
nice.
For the listeners, everybody put their hands up.
There'll be lots of opportunities to plug this, and then like I don't know, you put something on, but you're ignoring it. You're messing about on your phone. You're texting your friends. You're doing a bit of work. You're making dinner. Everyone's hands go up. Distracting the kids, hands go up, right? And so what we were trying to show through that little party bit was there are lots of different reasons to use the product, and actually, it's what was popularized at the time was marketing would have personas where it'd be like, oh, this is the tech savvy one, and as if there was like so binary. And my point was like, no, we're all of these all the time. So that was one kind of like revelation. We called it mindsets, and then another one I'll use Arsenal again. This is a while back, so I don't think they'll mind me saying, but they were kind of looking at international expansion for their website and apps. And we did a research in a bunch of their key territories, and a few that I can just recall were we developed something which we called like a landscape map, which was like essentially just plotting all the different products people used and like what they used them for, right? We just a little visualization of that. And in Indonesia, the website arsenal.com was big because everyone used it, and it was like their gateway to the club, and they wanted to hear about the players and what was going, and that was how they felt connected to the club. Twitter was also pretty big on this landscape. And then we went, in the US, it wasn't really that actually, and it was smaller on the map, and it was like they would go to the Arsenal website for kind of official news, like maybe confirming which players they bought or sold. And commentary became quite a big thing because they didn't always have the rights, and they would like to watch like the live commentary. But then they had other things appearing on the map, like they wanted to connect with communities, or they wanted like in-depth tactical analysis, which didn't make sense for Indonesia. And then in the UK, the website is this tiny little dot on the map. Because no one uses it because it's for tickets and it's kind of not for anything else, or it wasn't back at the time. So it's this illustration of like same products, but like people have vastly different things that they're trying to do with that product. So not jobs to be done, but jobs to be asked, I would say.
Yeah, very much the same philosophy.
Yeah, I really like this trick. I mean, especially this TV watching habit where you can already illustrate, because I think that is sometimes something that is not maybe represented, but there is an idea out there that there's one product, one job, or one product, one use, or one product, one way of using it. And I think you've beautifully shown that that's generally never the case. I mean, maybe in very specific like healthcare stuff, but even there, I wouldn't be so sure. I think that I really like that, this illustration of, hey, there's lots of different users. We're not that clear cut. We're not persona A or B. And there's lots of different uses of the same product. I would assume a lot of companies have a very strong internal view what the use is, while neglecting the rest. But I don't know how
and what jobs to be done did was like pivot away from like the task to the motivation, right? So if you said people want to come and hit play on something, then they would all be the same, but that's missing the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is so good, so good. Your exact words were perfect. It helps jobs you and helps you to understand the reasons. That's your words was the reasons. And it's funny. I just reflecting on your example. So I'll put like an old football game on like the side, like while I already know the result, but I'll do it while I'm working. And it's just sort of an alternative. It's a substitute product to study music. Right.
Yeah.
Because I already know it's going to happen. I don't have to pay attention. I don't have to follow it, but it's just a little bit of noise. And I don't know if people in the sports entertainment business would see themselves in competition with study music. That's a really, really good, really great point.
Yeah, you're kind of competing with white noise at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Calm.com. You're competing with calm.com.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say
You know,
it.
I have to say this too. I love your point about being unimpressed by, well, we're going to take this and write it in job stories. And now we write it on all these little cards and fill out these little templates. And now that's what jobs
But
can do.
yeah, I mean, I used to rail pretty hard against this, like,
Yeah.
because they would say, like, as a user, I want to log in so that I can access, and I would.
That's just
It probably wasn't very effective. But I would say, do you know what? If we took login away, no
Right.
one was going, I can't log in. That it just wouldn't
Yeah.
be a thing. But this is just so false, like, but
Yeah.
it was big at the time.
Yeah.
Well, I fear it still is inserted, but I mean sometimes these templates and structures they help to have some kind of really have a structure and the wording, but it gives you the illusion of being. I mean, I know of a couple of companies where personas are created in an internal workshop, right? And then, well, you can do that for some cases, but in general, that's just, I mean, a couple of people making stuff up, right?
Well,
So I like
look,
your
like,
emphasis on research.
yeah, and I'm being a bit naughty because, like, any tool you can use it well or you can use it
Yeah.
poorly. I listened to Jared Spool, and obviously he has his thoughts on jobs to be done
Yes.
as he does. And I was left after that thinking, like, yeah, but like you could use anything badly and it would turn out bad. Like that's not,
Yeah.
that's not a way to debunk anything, really.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes tools are also taken for maybe more than what they're supposed to do. So like an analogy would be financial and analytical accounting or something like this, where they don't have exactly the same purpose. And I think for the user stories, I think they are very useful for developers because you're already kind of in a solution kind of space. So I mean, maybe actually using jobs to be done would be just as good, but somehow if you want to get something practical and a feature built, I think it's not necessarily such a bad framing, but it doesn't really help you with the strategic aspects. It doesn't really help you really understand, as you said, people don't want to log in. They want to.
Yeah. I mean, as I understand it, their original intent was like success criteria, right? It's almost like it needs to pass these criteria that they can do this and then see this, and that was its intent. Not, but as you say, it's probably been reappropriated along the way.
So I want to move us a little bit into how you're kind of using it now, or what role it plays at the work you do on the beach, if that's good. So can you give us maybe a little bit of a glimpse of, first of all, like what really is it that On the Beach does, and then how kind of your approach to user research is now informed there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know like how well these terms translate across different territories, but On the Beach is a travel agent, is what I would call it in the UK, which means that broadly, if I was to nutshell it for you, we sell package holidays bundled up with an individual price. So it's often composed of like a flight, a hotel, a transfer. It could have insurance, and that type of stuff. And the benefits, broadly are, number one, scale, right? So it's a marketplace. You can buy lots of holidays and you can connect at lots of different paths. You can pick the flights you want. And of course, that helps keep healthy competition, right? Which keeps prices down. And then secondly, it's lots of people appreciate the convenience because you just don't want to book all the constituent parts and hope they knit together, right? You want someone else to make that problem go away for you. So that's kind of one of the roles of a travel agent. I would say because we have scale, we have lots of transactions. Data is important to us, right? And so just to like frame where I think kind of jobs to be done sits, I would say what we're trying to do is always have like a really well-rounded view of anything, of what the thing is. So that means like we have lots of data. We always want more, but we're like places. I've seen a lot of places in my agency days, and then I've worked at a few places, and I think the kind of availability of data is good. It's one of the things that made me want to come to the company. And that's like product analytics or like commercial data. Every kind of team has its own metrics and data that it's looking at, and everyone does lots of experiments. We're always creating new, so hopefully I've painted the picture. Lots of data insight, but then paired with that, we of course need that user insight. And so what I've been at the company for just over a year, and I kind of building out the team in that time, and we were doing lots of like kind of mostly evaluative stuff, so testing ideas or testing how the product is performing, and obviously what jobs to be done is at the other end of the scale there in terms of like generative. So we've been focusing a lot on building that out and going and doing this work, and then so data and user insight. And then I would say the third kind of thing that we draw inspiration from is our strategy, because like not everything comes from data and insight, right? Data and insight can kind of tell you what's there or what's happening now, or maybe what if we did this, the what is and the what if, but also like sometimes you're just taking bets, right? And you're more hypothesis driven. So it like in terms of how jobs to be done is fitting in for us, like we're doing lots of research. Like we've launched like a couple of maybe like 3 or 4 big things and like 20 small things, and where we kind of started was a close cousin of jobs to be done, or a way to frame it, just behavioral archetypes. So just trying to understand broadly, what are people trying to do? How do they kind of attack this problem of trying to find and book a holiday? How long does it take them? What products do they use? How does it differ? And of course, what we see is that like what people are like affects that. So some people, and maybe again we'll do a little hands up game if you feel like it, but like some people are very chill, right? And they don't worry about it too much, and maybe they don't even have everything booked before they go. And then you have other people who are like very like they want control, and they want to research absolutely everything and make sure they're going to the best place with the best restaurants and the best views and the best shopping and whatever. Look into every detail, in tons of detail. A lot of people kind of just dislike the travel bit. They just sort of, am I gonna, is my flight gonna be on time? And that causes a lot of so we're just like, you can kind of map these things out basically. And then in where the jobs to be done comes in is like what conscious and subconscious questions are they asking throughout that journey. So let's just say you don't know where you want to go. So like, how do you go about figuring where you want to go? It's not really asking where do I want to go. Your question might be like, where's nice that I can afford? That's the job that you initially start with, and then you work through from there. And we've done research that kind of gives us an idea of what products people are using to solve those things, because as much as we might like to think it, they're not doing it all on our products, I can promise you. And then what's good and bad about all of that, so that's kind of where it fits in. But I think it's framed, and we found like a bunch of different kind of behavioral archetypes where broadly people are following the same patterns, and then that means that they broadly have a similar set of jobs to be done, that they're broadly using the same sort of products to answer, and that's kind of where it fits in, I would say, in terms of that.
I really like that. Go on, sorry, John.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could give us, if you are allowed to, a kind of overview of the general topics you're tracking with the KPIs you're using. So what are your focuses in terms of KPIs? And you said you've got a lot of data.
Yeah, well, so our KPIs are like a mixture of like kind of commercial and products. Definitely, I'm now seeing how research is kind of influencing that. So yeah, we've had like a breakthrough much quicker than I had anticipated, actually, where so we use OKRs, another tool that you can wildly misuse if you want to, but hopefully we're pretty good at it. And we've been like trying to improve, and we're now at the stage where we basically just have one objective for the entire company, right? One OKR for all departments, and which I think is like the holy grail, and we can talk about it if you like, but probably a long conversation. And then, but what's really exciting is that the one that we're currently working on, which I'm unfortunately not going to be able to talk in detail about, but is I can trace its lineage very, very, very directly to a piece of research that one of our user researchers in our team like turned up about 2 months ago. And I don't know if they had noticed, but I said to them, like, there's now like X hundred people who are focused on this, which is because you said that 2 months ago. Like, if you want influence, like there it is. That's amazing. So yeah, but I'll probably get in trouble if I talk too much.
Of course. So, but maybe then a more general question on what your thinking is regarding how metrics relate to something like the jobs to be done. So, or what do you, I mean, how should one think about metrics? Should one, for example, is it a good idea to just focus on the frequency of sales, or like a real outcome of the process, or do you kind of focus more on the I mean, how customers think, and did they reach certain milestones, or that I was just wondering if there's a way to, because it's a question that I'm quite puzzled about, is how you can really relate understanding customers' jobs to be done with metrics. That's kind of the general question.
So there's probably a couple of ways that I would try to answer that. So one definitely, like, I believe and what we're doing is more focused on the outcome, right? That's the end rather than the means. So, and actually I'm often challenging people to be like, hold on, that's not an outcome. We need to rethink about this until it's an outcome, and like pushing that side of things, because that's my beliefs. But I think then where I think of the jobs to be done's role in that is that they're kind of saying, here's a bunch of good intel about how to improve that metric. So if you want to, let's use your example, you want to increase the frequency of sale, then like knowing like how customers think about that, and like when they're looking for that second sale or whatever, and like understanding the jobs to be done associated with that. So they're kind of like inputs, and teams may have the license to set themselves objectives at that point of like, we want to move this smaller number, which is our part of that thing, which could be a product analytic, but could equally be like improving like a customer score, like a CSAT or something like that. So that's kind of like one half, and then the other half I would say is just where I want to get further to, but we're still in the midst of doing this, is we're now at the stage where we have established our broad set of jobs to be done in a qualitative sense, and we're now quantifying them. And you'll know about all this because we've done this before, but essentially to get some sense of like, how important are these things, and how well fulfilled are those things for people across the range of products that they're using, essentially a gap analysis. So again, I actually probably would like to get to the point where our metrics are like, we want to see that job to be done score rise because that's linked to this. But ultimately, I think we need to still focus on the outcome, which is that if we do that, we think that
Mm.
more
Yeah.
sales, I think it has to relate to that. Otherwise, it's
Yeah, the thing is with the sales is the question is always that was actually because I think frequency of sales is a bit of a stupid metric because then you probably just put the prices down and increase just the
you
number
can
of
gain
widgets you
anything,
sell.
yeah.
So that's not a great one, but a typical one would be for a sales team to increase their target of revenue of like total volume of not volume like the cash amount of sales by 10%. And there's always kind of a gap between, okay, well, we need to increase that metric, but there's no explanation or causal mechanism as to how that should be done. So you just have people, I don't know, working twice as much or something, but where do you actually get the insight into how you can achieve this? You see, that's always for me. Anyway, that
Yeah,
was
no,
just my
I
curiosity.
don't think that's straightforward at all. But
Yeah.
sort of at a high level, I think like understanding the jobs to be done for the customers in the area, and like presumably the thing that they're buying will have value in different ways to them, and so you would shed light on it in that regard. That would be how I'd see it. But again, it's not the only part of the puzzle, right? Because there's lots of other information and data and strategy that needs to all contribute to this. But yeah, certainly like going and shedding light on what our customers think about the things that they're doing, and even like what they think they're doing. It's, I think, can only help you figure out where to target.
Yeah, and I think you put it right nicely where you said it kind of gives you the levers, like what do you might need to change in order to see another number and outcome then change in the end. And of course, that's never like clear, well, or rarely clear cut or just a one-on-one relation, but at least you know where you can focus on in a much more, you have much more confidence, even if you go for quantification, then then you really know what are the potential 10 levers instead of the 500 that are at your disposal. So I think that somehow limiting that's, I don't know, all
Yeah,
these
knowing
options
what's
that
ahead.
you can, all these knobs you can turn if you just have fewer of them, that already is super helpful, I think.
Yeah, like where's the best place to place bets is kind of what
Yeah,
you're after. Yeah.
yeah.
But this was an experience I had on I was doing the analytics for a small company on their website, and it was for me a project that I wanted to do to try and really get into the analytics. So I used the Google Tag Manager, like I really went deep in doing tracking everything with funnels and blah blah blah, and I did a really complex thing. And for me, there was a very interesting lesson at the end of this that I had all this amazing data and I could not figure it didn't basically it was extremely hard to then figure out
What was
what is
affecting what?
yeah, what should I do with this? Because you could see, okay, people leave the page at this level. Okay, great. So it doesn't tell you then how to improve the product. And that was a very interesting experience for me that
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm picturing the meme where it's like the bell curve, and at one end is like a Jedi Knight, and the other is a caveman,
I
and
know
it's
which,
like,
yeah.
and it's like oh, like all the
yeah,
stuff and analytics and everything, and
I was the midwit in that one. Yeah, I did all the
at both ends it just says like talk to customers.
just well,
talk to customers. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay, good.
I know that well, or let's put it that way. I mean, this kind of thinking. Well, you're just saying, well, let's go out and talk to customers. I mean, I think that companies have done a learning curve, and more. I think this is kind of an depends on the industry, depends on the company, but is an established way. But still, this way of kind of moving away at first hand from your own product and your own kind of internal perspective is rather new, or it's not something that many are comfortable with even. So can you give us a little bit of a view of how do you sneak this kind of thinking in? Did you even have to? Maybe that's a different culture on the beach, but like how do you get buy-in for that? I find that it's like one of the biggest. I mean, there is research challenges and so on, but like at the first hand, how do you get people to buy in into this kind of thinking? Even is for me a huge challenge.
Yeah, I mean, like on some level, I'm like, why try with people that don't desperately want it, right? So like, why take a job where
true.
where it's going to be attritional and uphill, and you're going to have to fight, and convince, and like, why would you set yourself that challenge? So I know that's like a very luxurious position to be able to make it like that, but I've always been like quite a believer of like, pick your boss, like who you think is going to back you to do that thing. Pick your client, if you're on the agency side. And I think, I've already said, like, when I was at my agency, it was a very principled place, and that meant that anyone who was getting in touch with us had already like come, they were meeting us halfway already, because otherwise they wouldn't have found us, right? And we were very staunch. It was like, yeah, if you want our results, like, you've got to put up with our process, and
take
like,
it or leave it.
Fine, like, take it or leave it, and it wasn't, it was just like, we're big believers in this, and we've got years of evidence to suggest that this is the right way to go. So I think, on some level, the challenge of like changing the face of a company without much support isn't that appealing to me personally, and I think that makes it quite hard. But I think, outside of trying to go to places where it's already a high priority, I would say just like fundamentally what all of this is about getting like really good insights kind of packaged and delivered in the right way to people. And like, anyone who's a researcher worth their salt is capable of doing that in a lot of situations, right? So I've never really been a big believer in the whole seat of the table conversation, and actually I've seen the industry start to talk about how that's like part of the problem, is that we always talk about the seat of the table and don't know what to do when we get there. And I think actually you can actually, I think you can always do something, right? So if you can get like really good insights and share them with people, and they think they're good, then they're probably going to use them. So probably how I've tended to start, if even if I'm in a company like I've moved to with like a, I've got great support from my boss and that, but still I've got a lot of people who aren't that familiar with this approach. I would say like probably what we've tried to do is make the first like wave like brutally concise and maybe like simplistic, to kind of like punch through, because this is like, we can get as complex as we like here, right? We will be in this world a while, and Jonathan, you were saying how complex you've got with your analytics fun times, and you really can go down those rabbit holes. And I think that people don't really want to do that, right? Until they're bought into a thing, because it just sounds like snake oil maybe. So I think start very, very, very simple. So, like we just got a few archetypes, and believe me, like, we can go into a lot of depth with them, but actually what we chose to present to most people in the company was it was actually just represented by 3 GIFs and the name of the thing. And we just kind of like paused there.
That's great.
Right? It just really helped people understand, like, some people, I said it earlier, some people are chill, some people really look into the detail, and some people hate the travel bit, and it's like it was just like very simple and easy to understand. So, and I hope that like starts to punch through. And I hear people talking about the names of these things. It's always like nice when the CEO in like an all hands says,
that's when it sticks, right?
He says the name of one of them, and I'm like, yes, good, we got that.
Well, that's the advantage of personas, of course, which are very memorable in that sense. Catchy.
They're snappy, right? They're punchy. The other things I would say is like, probably you're always going to find at a company people who are more or less disposed to something like this. So very often, people will set themselves an incredibly lofty challenge of like, I'm going to convince the CMO of this, and they'll grind away at that. And like, that's hard. Like, that person has a lot of experience, and they've got where they are by being competent and knowing what they're talking about and having success. And, and they've hired teams of people who presumably bought into what they're doing. And so that's like that's a tough place to start unless they're very favorable. So, I think go to the people who seem like they want it. So that might be, one of the PMs. Like, if they seem really interested in it, like, get something going there I would say,
That's
and
great. Yeah.
work with them, or maybe you have some engineers or whatever who are interested in that, and like kind of
Mm.
the it can be tempting to like go for the people who seem like they're not believers and try and convert them, but that's like a tough ask when you're
Yeah.
just getting started. So I would go for the favorable people. It's that whole circles of control, right? Like you can control what you do, you can influence the people who want to be influenced, and you can't influence the people who don't. So start there.
But I really like this.
Great
This
insight. Yeah.
for me, it's maybe I'm paraphrasing wrong, but I feel like you said two things, and I think they're really worth emphasizing. I think the first one, and I see this again and again, is like I don't know how to call this, but like insight selection. Like not everything, especially when you have UX people there, not everything you learned and heard and the richness that you heard in the interviews, other people don't need to know. Some people just need to know a very thin slice of what you know, but that's what's going to have impact. If you tell them the interesting bit plus all the richness, it will get dissolved. So I think that is a point that's very worth emphasizing, like inside selection, or I don't know how like be very specific on who you tell what
Yeah,
to,
and
and then this path of least resistance of go where you already have somebody who is open to this kind of work. So
yeah, or yeah, I mean, path of least resistance is usually associated with laziness, but I would say it's like path of
no, but that's like
earliest impact, right? Like
yeah,
if you do well with that person, they'll start talking about it, and all of a sudden there's
yeah,
two of you doing this now, So that's I am lazy, but that's not what's driving me there.
no,
What on the kind of really concise as well, I think this is one where I personally have struggled to communicate this effectively to researchers, like even researchers in my team, if I'm going to be brutally honest. And it's left them with the impression that I want to drastically simplify things, and that like I don't appreciate the value of research, which I don't think that about myself. So that was quite hard when I learned that from people that I'd been like I've been pitching it wrong to them. And how I've sort of tried to talk about it since, which sort of works with some people, is like, look, on the one end you've got like really like integrous, like really high quality, academic, brilliant, comprehensive research. And then on the other end of my imaginary scale, you've got something people will use. And so I don't, I'm prepared to walk this way, right? And I am prepared to make it simpler, leave out some stuff, especially early on, if it means that more people will use it, because that'll make it better for us next time. And soon people will be like, what else you got? Right. And then it doesn't take long to snowball. But I think if you go in with the sort of full throttle stuff, that can just be a turn off. That leads me, I got like another thing as well here, which we really try to focus on, which is make the things that you're creating feel like amendable and collaborative. So they're not like here, I'm giving you a thing, you have to read the thing and it's your Bible, right? It's more like, this is what we've learned, but let's talk about it. So we're really, everything's like we've got a million Miros and things like this, or Notions or whatever, and again, like probably not a great revelation, but steering away from like long reports and dashboards and spreadsheets, which feel like you're scared to touch them, and deliberately choosing to kind of like put it in a place that feels like it's encouraging collaboration and encouraging people to say, I got a question, or I'm going to drop a comment on this, or put a link to a thing, and it again, that just makes it like, not I'm trying to tell you what to do, but I'm just trying to give you information, but I need to understand what's helpful to you. Just flipping it a bit to make it more amenable.
This is something I noticed when I had my company, that if you involve people, in this case it was clients, but it could be internal stakeholders in the actual product, or the deliverable that you're trying to create, people will take it as theirs also. Somehow it's a good way. If you just deliver a finished thing and you don't, and you have to do it in an honest way, of course. It mustn't be just manipulative, that you say, give me your opinion, and then just for manipulation. But if you do this in a sincere way and involve people, I think it really does make them own the final result and adopt it.
and not to get too meta, but like we're delivering our product too, right? The research is a product that's going to help them do a job, right? So I don't want to like navel gaze here, but it's like,
of course,
if we're not prepared to listen to what they think is important, like, aren't we? We're not doing it, right? We're forgetting what we stand for right at the last hurdle. So yeah, I completely agree. Like the Big Bang is like just not it.
Yeah. No, but it's something we learned as well as an agency also at Membridge, where we kind of for a long time I think, well, some time ago now, but still for a long time I thought like if you just have the right kind of data and the kind of, I mean, in hindsight it sounds so weird, but if the right kind of slide deck, you will win over like I don't know, hundreds of people, but like that's what an illusion, right? So and then what we're trying to come up with is sort of similar things that you're talking about. So we call this like a spin phase, where we say once kind of the results are in, you need to find ways so that people can start working with the insights, that they can, it's somehow it needs to start their thinking, and it's not just kind of a result. Usually it was a results presentation, and then we would kind of go out 6 months later, we would check in, and little happened. So, and that's not what we want to have. Like we want to have some kind of impact and leave some kind of trail, and you need to involve people in whatever ways you can find that produce meaningful work. So I think that's what you say, Jonathan. I mean, you can see this LinkedIn post where at the end it says, "What do you think?" And that's probably not the the way to engage people, but find honest ways to engage them, to work
Well,
with them.
I was listening to your Jeff Baker podcast the other day, and
Yeah.
he's had the same realization that I guess we've all had. I've certainly had, which is, because when I was a UXer and I first really worked with researchers and kind of set up the research team, and it was like, oh my God, look at what these people can do. They can bring this beautiful information, and it gives me a million ideas, but it like points me, in vaguely the right direction, and like, oh my God. And it was just like it clicked. I was like, this is my calling, right? I love this. And so I just assumed, well, everyone else must think that, and then so you produce the thing and you're like, what is that? And then people are like, okay, like, and because obviously they've got a different background and they came to it from a different angle, and they prioritize a different type of information, and yeah, it's like, I think Jeff said something like, it's absolutely not enough to just like produce the thing. You've got to figure out how to embed it and like bake it in, and that's like a fresh puzzle, like absolutely every time. And you got all sorts of different audiences, right? So you've got the product and technology and engineering teams that are going to be like building the thing. I'm talking software because that's my world, but like the teams that build the stuff.
Yeah.
But then you've got, like, to me, like more adjacent teams like marketing or editorial or buying or whatever they might be. And then you've probably got like very senior leadership, and then you've got like kind of everyone at the company, and there's like everyone needs, like, they don't all need the same thing, right? And you've got to figure out, and there's no silver bullet for that. You can get better at like starting points, but I've definitely tried things in this company that didn't work, that went gangbusters elsewhere. So yeah, just figure it out.
Yeah, I thought Jeff's point was quite interesting, talking about focusing on the engineers. I thought that was quite an interesting idea you mentioned.
Yeah, like the people who are actually going to be doing the stuff, and like if you can make it seem like you're giving them just useful information that can make them better, because no one wants to be handed like a list of things which is like, now you got to do this, right? And yeah, he was spot on with that.
Yeah. How do you perceive this in the, I mean, maybe kind of getting into the last kind of groups of people that we can talk about. So, but well, let me put it that way. So I have made a couple of experiences, mostly this year. I don't know if it's the year or if it's me, but mostly this year I've met designers who had quite an opinionated view against even user research. Not that they would say, well, I don't care about the user at all, but like, no, design is about something that, well, the user, basically the user has no clue. So why should I even go about asking them? What I know is how I design stuff well, and there's rules and principles and all, which probably is true. I know, I don't want to seem like I know, but so where there's more about, well, we focus on our craft and doing design well, then that's what we're tasked to do. So who cares about the user?
Yeah, I mean, I think I haven't actually encountered that much, So, but I do know what
Well,
you're
you're selecting probably.
yeah, or I am that opinion. I just don't know. But I think what the design industry has seen over the last, probably 15 years is like a real shift to a reliance on design systems, which makes sense for many, many, many reasons. But like one of the counter arguments to it is that it diminishes creativity and that all products just start like feeling the same and looking the same, and so I think
Yeah.
like maybe it's coming from there, like it's
So,
not as
sorry, what is design systems?
so design systems is like you're effectively having a team that creates all the Lego bricks, and then all you do as a designer is pick up different Lego bricks and put them in different configurations to like build the thing, right? So it's a software
Kind of
thing where
modular approach. Yeah.
modular approach. All of the components are like built, and they're in many cases they are steadfastly guarded by a specific team. And if someone wants to say, oh, I need to do a new thing, they're like, no, almost like, no, you can't. You got to stick with the
Yeah.
design system. And then that's like I'm telling a terrible example. Obviously there's tremendous benefits that like that kind of efficiency brings, and particularly if you've got lots of teams, you don't want lots of people doing slightly different
Yes.
versions of the same thing again and again and again. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm not an advocate. But other observations to answer your initial point, Jan, is that I think one thing that definitely happens is people get like very, very, very obsessed with their competitors or like what they
Yeah.
perceive as like good design elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it always baffles me, the obsession with competitors, maybe because I've worked in an industry and worked with a lot of companies who would perceive themselves as competing with each other. There's always this sort of tacit assumption that the other guys know what they're doing. It's just like,
Yeah.
why would you
Right.
I
assume that
like
they
that.
know more
Yeah,
than what
yeah.
we do? We hired a bunch of people from over there, and
They're
I just never
idiots.
really bought
Yeah.
that, like, as a way of
Yeah.
focusing.
Yeah. That's
So,
so
so
important. So important.
we had a real I don't know if I should tell this one, but we had like one that sort of made me chuckle recently, which was we kind of we feel like in a certain part of our product, like a certain flow like could be performing better, and it's like
Mm.
uh also the way it's built isn't ideal. So we've been kind of like looking at like, oh, I don't know, how could we make this better. And so we did what people do is we had a look at it, we had a look at the data, and but one of the things that we did is looked at what other people do, not just in our industry but elsewhere. And it was funny because we sort of like liked the look of what one of our competitors had done, and we were talking about
Mm.
it. It's like, yeah, actually now we're looking at it, it makes tons of sense, like what they're doing. And so we started like mapping out and like testing it and exploring it and seeing what it would mean for us. Anyway, like a little way into this, we noticed that they flipped what they had to mirror ours. So they were on
Oh,
the,
so
on
you
the
did.
other end of the looking glass
So
going,
who was copying who?
those, and it was just like, yeah, none of us know what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is, of course, it's like the cargo cult, right? You
Right.
copy the surface level of how things seem to work, but the
Yeah.
whole underlying understanding of the mechanics of why you do something in a certain way, you've not figured out for yourself. So you can't really make it sustainably work because it maybe doesn't fit within your
You're kind of
company.
copying the wrong thing, right?
You're copying, yeah, you don't know what is the why this feature is there, what's the reason for it to be there. You just
Yeah,
see the feature, but you don't have the understanding. And I think you can only get the understanding through trying to through having a theory yourself about a hypothesis. You talked about that before, and then testing it and seeing if it works or doesn't. And that's how you build your theory and you about how things
absolutely.
Good.
And
work.
then you also kind of assume that feature, must be doing well, otherwise they wouldn't have it, which is like, I don't know. I've worked in a lot of places where we just couldn't kill like a bunch of things that we hated for various reasons. Maybe that's
Yeah.
what it is. But
Yeah. So
yeah,
I've seen
sorry,
this
go ahead.
exact same thing you talk about where one company, I won't tell the stories, but we're two competitors, each copy each other and swap. And it's funny. I was just reading. I forget the investor, but there was some famous investor. And he had all his rules, but this one, I forget his name, but this one rule stuck with me. He said, if you ever invest in something and the reason he invested changes, then he immediately sells. Like no matter what's going on. And that reminds me of this because when you're copying your competition, you're copying, you don't know why it's set up that way. Like you're just copying the end result without understanding the logic of the reason it's constructed that way. And I think that's why copying is ultimately, destined for
Yeah.
failure.
I would say I've worked with some incredible I would call them UI designers, which is maybe like a slight outdated term, and what they can add when they're allowed to, is
Yeah.
mind-bogglingly. They
Yeah.
can make things better than you even dreamed they could be.
Yeah.
Right? They're like
Yeah.
these 10x, I guess, these 10x people, but that can happen. But yeah, in order to go all the way back, like, how do we attack the argument of like we don't need to talk to our customers? I always just think like customer insights are just like the great leveler, because until you have insights and data, you have opinion.
Yeah. Right.
And insights and data like kind of cut through that, but not really in a way that in like a galvanizing way, rather than shutting people down. And it's more like everyone can now focus because we have something to focus on, right? And as long as I'm always very careful. I was having a conversation with one of the researchers earlier this week that we want to kind of keep a distance between what we have learned about customers and that the sort of truth of the insight and any solution ideas that we might have.
Okay.
Because if the research says like we should do this and then this fails, as well as throwing away the solution, you run the risk of discrediting the research, whereas the research is probably right? So I think like keeping that healthy separation. So the research it doesn't actually tell us what to do. It just tells us where we can go looking when we know what we want to do. And I think this actually might be borrowing a phrase off Jared Spool that stuck with me, which is, as a design leader or as a research leader, you're trying to fill your organization with deep, rich user insights. I think that comes from Jared. And, I fully subscribe to that, because I think if everyone just knows a bit more about customers and how they think and what they care about, every decision at the company is going to get better. And because how could it not, right? It's just more useful information for people to react to.
And I think that's a great goal. I had just a recent, before bringing this how Scott says, it's always like bringing the plane down a little bit. I had a great project just like a couple of months ago where the more or less officially stated goal was, I want everybody, when they get a coffee together, talk about user problems. I don't care. Well, of course I care about the insights and who we're talking, but the actual goal I want to achieve is, if they get a coffee, I want them to talk about user problems. And I thought that was one of the most brilliant ways of choosing what is it actually that you want to achieve. Because I fully agree. Like, if everybody has that in the back of their mind, it will influence their decision making. And there's thousands of decisions that they make without even thinking that the customer could have an influence. But if they know, it will change the trajectory of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's funny. We in our office we have like an in-house coffee shop, and often
this is such a great idea.
Throughout the day, you'll find like people obviously just like queuing. They're waiting, and I have actually looked at the space there, and I'm like, I could just put a TV screen here and just have like it's on a loop. This might be good.
Next time when I'm in London, I will show you the office. They did exactly that. Well, hey, Chris, we covered a lot of ground. It was super interesting. Is there anything else you wanna add that we should have touched upon and we didn't?
No, I don't. I mean, really, like, I think I think jobs to be done, and like understanding users and kind of framing it in like away from what's the task they're trying to complete on the product to what do they think they're trying to do is incredibly valuable. And you don't have to call it jobs to be done to be getting close. So I think actually I think sometimes the sort of I know we've got a strategy and alumni on the call, so I need to be a bit careful. But the terminology of like you hire and fire, it may be like I've found that I want to explain it in a different way, which is probably too dumb, but like you use a thing to do a thing, right? And if that thing is not helping you, you throw it away and you get something else, right? That's kind of the essence of it. But they're kind of part of it, right? And I think like that's what I'm always keen to to stress. Like, this is not a coup. We're not trying to say this is the only source of truth, but it's a really useful one to add. And even in the land of of research and insight, I talked about, we have like archetypes. I talked about those product landscapes, and we do lots of testing and experimenting, and like they all kind of contribute to that understanding, and jobs to be done can be part of that. But to slightly broaden it, I just think like understanding what people think they're trying to do when they're using products, and how good they think those are, is just like a really incredible set of information to be sharing with people. So
no, I love that. I'm dreaming of doing a project where I don't talk about any kind of like jargon. I don't need jargon to sell it. I don't need jargon to explain it. I'm dreaming. I don't think I will achieve it, but that to me would be like the perfect way of actually doing things. So, well, Chris, thank you so much. But of course, I cannot let you go without. You probably have the best holiday tips, right? To come up, or where should we go and look, and what are the best kind of bargains that we could get out, or anything on that end? Because I'm in a couple of days I will be going on holiday, so I'm
well, I can certainly tell you what website you should be using. No, I think I probably have like too much insider trading to be able to share.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I've just got back from holiday, and I was in Greece, and even like mid-October, it was still like warm enough for me to be getting in the sea. So I think those slightly out of season spaces for a bit of sun are definitely the way to go.
Nice.
Fantastic.
Chris, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. I could talk about this all day, and thanks for making the time.
Well, we have kind of spared the OKR thing, so maybe we'll find another time and go into that.
That's like a whole other hour right there.
Yeah. Well, and that, my friend. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I would actually love to have a discussion about more on the metrics side, if you would like to join us.
Yeah, spend a lot of time thinking about it, and mostly, again, it's like the meta here is like you want people focused on the right things, right? And so you can get as complex as you like, and I tend to prefer a bit simpler. But yeah, maybe let's set aside another
No,
time.
but here's the offer: you do the quant stuff, and after you've done it, we'll talk about how it influenced the metrics, right?
Hey, I've already told you our OKR for the entire company has been.
Oh yeah, right. You're already there.
We're already ahead of that, which is very exciting.
All right. So, well, thank you so much, and that concludes today's Product Quest podcast. So, as always, please send any ideas or comments for future shows or comments to productquest@gmail.com, and see you next time.
It was great.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks very much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.